shifting from what's wrong with this client to what happened to this client.
Masking comes at a cost, a very expensive cost.
Honoring communication does not mean that you need to say yes to everything. This is more of a lens shift.
What is neurodiversity? What makes the practice neuroaffirming? Join us at the Neurodiversity MENA podcast, where we'll share the answers to all your neurodiversity questions. Whether you're navigating neurodiversity yourself, advocating for a loved one, or looking to make your practice more neuroaffirming, or just curious to learn more, this podcast is for you. Let's shape a world where all brains can thrive.
For so long, the focus was and still on the deficits rather than the strengths, forcing neurodivergent individuals to fit into a mold that isn't made for them. The neuronormative mold that the society wants us to believe is the benchmark. Not everyone can fit into this one-size-fits-all mold.
What if we let go of the expectation that neurodivergence should conform to the neuronormative standards? Welcome to the Neurodiversity MENA podcast. I'm Shija Sapru, she, her. Joining me today is Kehdy and a new member from our team, Sylwia Van Baig. Today, in episode 3, we discuss neuroaffirming in action. Let's start with Sylwia itself. Please explain.
So in simple terms, neuroaffirming means recognizing and respecting neurodivergent identities and needs without trying to normalize or suppress them. So instead of asking, how can we make this person act neurotypical, we ask, how can we create environments where they thrive as they are? A neuroaffirming mindset not only involves respecting and accepting different cognitive and sensory experiences, but also recognizing that individuals may need specific support to thrive in society.
And now, after defining neuroaffirming again, as we already discussed this in the previous episodes, but we wanted to re-emphasize on it today. So let's talk now about the why behind the neuroaffirming practices before digging into them. So I feel like explaining the why behind this to our listeners is really essential because it helps everyone understand the bigger picture. Why? Why neuroaffirming practices? So many systems are built around the needs of neurotypical individuals, which can leave the neurodivergent individuals feel like excluded and they don't belong. By adopting neuroaffirming practices, we ensure that everyone, the neurodiverse population, neurotypical and neurodivergent, regardless of their cognitive style, they do have equal access to opportunities, whether at work, at school, universities, everywhere. Sylwia, why do you think being neuroaffirming is really important?
To me, when neurodivergent individuals are in the environments that don't fully understand or don't fully support their differences, it can lead to a feeling of isolation, of frustration, and low self-esteem. So over time, this can increase emotional stress and impact the overall well-being. So neuroaffirming practices help by creating environments that are more supportive, that are more understanding, which can then reduce the risk of harm and promote emotional safety. So sadly, neuroaffirming people like myself, other adults, teenagers, kids often face extra challenges in society, like misunderstanding, lack of proper support, which can lead to bullying, which can lead to exclusion, and feeling invalidated. So this all can contribute to mental health conditions such as depression and anxiety, which is a really serious thing.
So neuroaffirming isn't just a practice or an approach. It actually helps in advocating for systemic changes in the society. It creates a world where everyone has access to opportunities, support, and resources, allowing them to thrive. Say, we do not have to know all the cultures to live in the UAE. And I can be aware of the differences and be curious and learn to accept those differences. It is exactly the same way when you see differences in a child or an individual. We just have to be curious about those differences. And also say the inability to maintain a good eye contact, which is seen as a neurodivergent trait. But in some cultures, that is not even accepted. So being neuroaffirming is like challenging our own assumptions and beliefs on how one is supposed to be and leaving that choice to be themselves. Sylwia, can you give an idea for a beginner? Where can someone start be neuroaffirming?
So that's a very good question. Well, I think that neuroaffirming practices should be integrated into all areas of our life, not just schools, not just clinics, not just workplaces. However, those environments are often the first places where individuals encounter support and services, right? So it is essential for those settings to lead by example in fostering an attitude of acceptance and understanding towards neurodivergents. So when schools and clinics are role models with neuroaffirming approaches, they inspire others to follow. And this increases the chances that families receiving support in those places will adopt neuroaffirming practices in the house, allowing them to focus on their children's individual needs, strengths, and values rather than trying to shape them to fit into societal mold. In turn, this helps raise neurodivergent children who can grow into their authentic selves, with the confidence and support to navigate the world in their own way.
True. And many of our listeners now may be wondering how an individual can be neuroaffirming. Whether it be a parent, a therapist, whether it be a teacher at school. So we can start by accepting that all neurotypes are equal. We have to accept this and believe also that all neurotypes are equal and that there is no one superior neurotype to another. So there's no need to change or to fix neurodivergent individuals to make them look more neurotypical, which means more like the majority. So neurotypicality by itself as a neurotype isn't superior at all or any better than any other neurotype like autism, ADHD, or many others. We should let go of this neuronormative benchmark of society that dictate to us which is the right or wrong brain, because neurodiversity is all about acceptance and that there is no right or wrong brain. Respecting also boundaries and autonomy is really important and essential, whether it's in therapy, at home, in school, college, everywhere, at workplaces too. So this helps in building advocacy skills. And some might think, actually, is this really good for children, especially children, respecting their autonomy? So what do you think, Shija, about that?
There's a common misconception because parents mistake autonomy and neuroaffirming practice as dismissive parenting. So honoring communication does not mean that you need to say yes to everything. This is more of a lens shift.
Absolutely. When we help kids realize their bodily needs, their way of functioning, and what works for them, in the way we are helping them advocate for themselves. The foundation of neuroaffirming practices is always connection, safety, and trust. The more opportunities they have to safely practice their advocacy skills with trusted adult, the better they get in advocating for themselves. And this starts at home with neuroaffirming parenting, which is about, just to give you examples, recognizing and validating a child's experiences, including their sensory, emotional, and cognitive needs, adapting environments and expectations to support a child's autonomy and well-being, encouraging self-advocacy and agency while providing necessary scaffolding, and focusing on collaboration with the child rather than control, fostering mutual trust.
Definitely. And I love when you said that the foundation of neuroaffirming practice is connection, safety, and trust. I'd like to say it's CST, like the CST, it's really important. This might also require reshaping parenting methods, right? And parenting strategies working between the parents to come up with a parenting plan or a plan which incorporates both their ideologies and ultimately tweaking them to what works for the neurodivergent child, what makes him feel safe, and what makes him feel supported at home. However, all this doesn't mean that there's no boundaries. And as Shija said before, that doesn't mean that we are implementing dismissive parenting. So it's not like letting a child do anything without any guidance or without any boundaries as well. So we can give you just a short example, which is about screens. And I'm sure like many of our listeners can resonate with this because there's a lot of talks about screens and the screen's limitation. So taking away screens as a punishment without understanding their role, the screen's role in the regulation, education, and even in the connection is not a good idea, because assuming screen time is inherently bad rather than recognizing its benefits, especially its benefits for communication for neurodivergent individuals, their learning, socializing, and self-regulation. We need to recognize its benefit as well, because many of the neurodivergent children or adults, they use also ACC, they use screens for communication. So it's more like, as a parent, I should say, okay, I see that my child is engaged with this game. Okay, let me ask some questions and let me be curious. Let me show my child that I'm interested. I can tell him, do you want to tell me more about it? What are you playing? Maybe I can join you. So this can show some, curiosity from our part, interest, and we can connect with them as well while playing the game. What do you think, Shija, about I know that you have also your own perspective on the screens and using screens. So what?
For me, this will prepare for the future, to have an idea about when to use, what to use, and how to use. Because when children learn to identify their needs, be it sensory, emotional, or even academic, they kind of develop that stronger sense of self. Like, for example, when a child can understand that loud noises actually overwhelm the child, they can ask for headphones, and as and when they need it. So self-advocacy helps kids set those boundaries and express when something is uncomfortable or overwhelming to them or even unfair to them.
I agree. I mean, the autonomy is a core part of neuroaffirming practices, because many neurodivergent individuals experience high level of control over their choices, over their bodies, their behaviors. And trust me, this control isn't theirs at all. So supporting autonomy means respecting a person's right to make his own choices about his life and about the ways that work for them and how their brain works. So there are many ways to respect autonomy, like, for example, respecting bodily autonomy, allowing the person, the individual, to stim, to fidget, to choose how they want to sit, how they want to stand, how they want to move even. So avoiding forcing behaviors like quiet hands, forcing eye contact, which is really uncomfortable for us, stillness, ensuring also that all touch, whether it's a hand fist, whether it's a handshake, whether it's a hug, all these kind of touches should be consensual. We should really ask for the consent, and it should never be forced, whether it's a child or it's an adult, even especially in therapy. Because I also think that providing a consent-based approach is the key to connection and meaningful connection and safe connections. So again, this is really important, especially in therapy sessions. I need to ask my kid, I need to ask my client if they want assistance and if they want to join a certain activity or do it. Well, if they say no, if the child says no, I need to honor their right to say no. So it's not only about honoring the adult saying no, it's also about honoring the children when they say no. Sylwia, can you think of other aspects in terms of autonomy and how we can respect individuals' autonomy?
So as I said previously, neurodivergent people, when they have control of their own lives, they develop self-trust, they develop confidence, they develop safety. So if they can choose for themselves activities they want to participate, definitely they're working on their self-advocacy skills as well, right? So supporting autonomy is about creating a world where neurodivergent individuals, adults, kids, teens, like everyone, are empowered to exist as they are. Again, we need to emphasize that being neuroaffirming does not mean that you decide on behalf of the child, as Karen said.
Yeah, because avoiding compliance-based language, for example, ignoring gestures as a way of communication and forcing a child to use a set phrase or number of words to request a need. Like an example would be, please open the door, when the child is actually pointing at the door. So, and if you keep saying that you need to use words, that's compliance-based language that you're using with the child. So hence, being neuroaffirming means to avoid these behaviorist approaches that prioritize conformity over well-being.
Wow. Well, this is a huge controversial topic here, but we're not going to dig in deeper today. But we're just saying today that when we say neuroaffirming practices, that means moving away from all compliance-based approaches and practices. So Shija, since you mentioned the compliance-based approaches, I want to highlight here also that many of these approaches can lead to masking. Now, what is masking? Masking is suppressing or hiding our natural behaviors, our natural traits, or ways of thinking, the ways of perceiving the world, in order to appear more like the majority, or what we say, the neurotypicals. So this is often done to avoid judgment, to avoid bullying maybe in school, to fit in socially, or maybe to meet societal expectations and pressure. But it comes at a cost, a very expensive cost. Sylwia, what do you think about the masking topic?
I think that all masking is really exhausting. Like all of us experience masking at some point of life. It's not worth it, honestly speaking. And we know nowadays that masking is often a survival strategy, if you think about it, in environments that do not cater to neurodivergent individuals' needs. So if the same places, if the same environments integrate neuroaffirming practices, not as many individuals will need to mask. And something people say, I actually heard it a lot, like, oh, but my child is happy, she seems happy in the schools, happy in the therapy room. Okay, let's unpack this. So while the child is at most times in the school or therapy room complaining or dissociated, means in freeze or fight state, teacher, parents, therapists, they often focus on the now. They focus on adjusting to what seems or looks important at that point of time, instead of looking at the bigger picture. So, okay, school day is over, therapy is over, the child is coming back home, and then we see all type of explosive behaviors, or we see them using several strategies to reset themselves, like more hours on devices, staying in their beds for long hours, unable to do anything. We can visualize it as an iceberg. So at the top, we see this complaining, happy child, but underneath of the iceberg, there is a lot going on. There is burnout, there is emotional exhaustion, there is masking, and huge energy drop.
Yeah. So that's why I think it's important also to have neuroaffirming therapists that could support neurodivergent kids and adults.
Yes. And now how to be neuroaffirming as a therapist? Like many of our listeners will definitely have this question in mind. So how to be a neuroaffirming therapist? I guess it means like recognizing, respecting, and adapting to the neurodivergent experiences rather than trying to fix them or change them or normalize them. It involves supporting your client in ways that honor their autonomy, that honor their cognitive style, their neurotype in general, and especially their lived experiences. So the therapists should really respect the autonomy, prioritize it for kids also. When they say no, as we mentioned earlier, they don't have to manipulate the child by using a reward system just so that the child can make or do the activity that the therapist has set as a goal. Because this is kind of manipulation that the child can sense, and then we can lose the trust and the safety. And as we said earlier, the foundation of a neuroaffirming approach is safety and connection and trust. So for teens and adults, the therapist should ask for consent at every stage in the therapy, including the call settings as well. They should create, of course, a sensory friendly space, accommodating all the individualized needs, sensory needs of their client or the child or the adult client. They should also work collaboratively with the child and the parents as well. And when we say collaboratively, that means not unilaterally. We should work with the child, with the parents, rather than working on the behalf of the child or for the child. We are working with him. So moving away from this ableist also and deficit-based language is really important. We need to start using more neuroaffirming language, safe language, we say, for the kids, which has the power to, empower them and to encourage them to self-advocate in the future. Because our language can either empower the children or it can perpetuate more internalized ableism. Many parents will ask, how will I know if this therapist is neuroaffirming? Is there like a kind of checklist, or how will I know? What do you think, Sylwia? Is there a checklist for a neuroaffirming therapist?
Well, I can definitely talk about red flags that families should look for, that red flags that would indicate that therapist is definitely not neuroaffirming. And that would be something like forcing eye contact. We mentioned it so many times. Asking the child to stop stimming. Forcing a child to communicate in certain way without respecting their preferred modality of communication. So that's 3 huge red flags. And then compliance-based approaches are surely the opposite and don't align with neurodiversity values. Parents should be mindful of the languages used in the session, as you said. Like if you notice that the language focuses on deficit rather than strength, this is also a sign, it's a red flag, definitely. Saying things in the session like, oh, everyone feels the same way, everyone feels like that sometimes. That would be a red flag for me, personally, as this devalues our experiences as neurodivergent individuals. And one important aspect is that therapy is supposed to be trauma-informed. Therapy is supposed to recognize how emotional responses are linked to neurobiology. This is absolutely crucial knowledge for any therapist supporting neurodivergent individuals. The therapist should recognize trauma and the correlation between trauma and neurodivergencies, shifting from what's wrong with this client to what happened to this client.
The curriculums for these therapies, when they were created always with a medical model, that is like a fix-it mindset. And now think about the parenting books. They were also not created for the neurodivergent children in mind, or to be a neuroaffirmative parent in mind. They were all based on neuronormative standards. So it is important to recognize that all this is so important. And these days, there are many people who claim to be neuroaffirming. But unfortunately, it is more of a marketing tool than a genuine approach as such. So hence, it's important for parents to really understand and learn better. Just like how Sylwia gave the checklist, those are the starting points that you can really look into. There are also many misconceptions around neuroaffirming approaches, because sometimes people think that being just child-led is neuroaffirming, but that doesn't necessarily mean respecting autonomy there. So being neuroaffirming helps the individual be accepted for who they are, instead of practicing approaches that kind of disregard their way of functioning or being. And let me take one moment here, because these days there are many therapists who are very keen in learning more about neuroaffirming practices by listening to neurodivergent voices and putting in a lot of effort in unlearning and relearning to support children better, or rather individuals better. So I would highly recommend parents to have these kind of open conversations to learn how to incorporate more of these approaches at home and even in classrooms.
I think that we all agree that at the heart of neuroaffirming approaches is the belief that every individual deserves to be understood, deserves to be respected, deserves to be supported in a way that truly works for them. I think also all of us agree that the more we challenge outdated norms by embracing neurodiversity, the closer we get to building a better world for all of us, not only neurodivergent people.
This is very important, to highlight that we're creating a better world for everyone, not just for one neurotype.
Exactly.
So we'll continue with this topic in the next episode, hopefully. So big thanks to you ladies for this amazing conversation, and thanks to all of you for tuning in. Stay in touch for more, definitely. We are preparing something more coming up. You can find us on Spotify, on Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Please share with your family members, share with your friends, and anybody who may like to learn, or anybody who just really want to talk about it. And don't forget to check on our website, www.neurodiversitymena.com. And follow us on Instagram, on Facebook, on Blue Sky, and all usual social medias. And we'll see each other next time.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.